Hey everybody, there doesn't seem to be much that everybody can get behind these days, but I think I found a topic that everybody should be able to get behind. These guys have the answer to lowering the carbon footprint. It's not going to affect your energy prices. It's not anything to do with politics. It's just cleaning up where we live and making the air better to breathe. So, listen to this one with an open mind. Like I said, there's not many things that we can all get behind anymore these days. It doesn't seem like this would be one of them. Anyways, please leave us a review on iTunes and Spotify. I love you guys. Thank you for all the support. It's been amazing. I'll see you soon. Enjoy the show.
I want to give a big thank you out right now to all the Vigilance Elite patrons out there that are watching the show right now. Just want to say thank you guys. You are our top supporters and you're what makes this show actually happen. If you're not on Vigilance Elite Patreon, I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on in there. So, we do a little bit of everything. There's plenty of behind the scenes content from the actual Shawn Ryan show. On top of that, basically what I do is I take a lot of the questions that I get from you guys or the patrons, and then I turn them into videos. So we get, right now, there's a lot of concern about self-defense, home defense, crimes on the rise all throughout the country, actually all throughout the world. And so we talk about everything from how to prep your home, how to clear your home, how to get familiar with a firearm, both rifle and pistol, for beginners and advanced. We talk about mindset. We talk about defensive driving. We have an end of the month live chat that I'm on at the end of every month where we can talk about whatever topics you guys have. It's actually done on Zoom. You might enjoy it. Check it out. And if Zoom's not your thing or you don't like live chats, like I said, there's a library of well over 100 videos on where to start with prepping, all the firearm stuff, pretty much anything you can think of. It's on there. So anyways, go to www.patreon.com/vigilanceelite or just go in the link in the description. It'll take you right there. And if you don't want to, and you just want to continue to watch the show, that's fine too. I appreciate it either way. Love you all. Let's get back to the show. Thank you. George Baker, welcome to the Shawn Ryan Show.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So you're a scientist and you've been working on this project for 23 years?
That's correct.
And basically what you've developed is what you call the answer to the carbon footprint, Solbere.
That's correct. It's part of the solution.
Part of the solution.
Part of the solution, and it works immediately, and is something that is, it's organic, and it functions the next day. If you spray a plant today, tomorrow it's catching more carbon, and it's protecting that plant from sunburn, which was the original start. 23 years ago was developing an aid for agriculture because so many of the crops burn. And we have all these new varieties, and they're very, very sensitive. And so that's where we came up with the technology way back when. And it just grows and grows and grows, and you learn more as time goes on. So,
Well, I'm dying to dive in. What I really, really like about this product is because climate change, global warming, the carbon footprint is a very divisive political subject now. What I like about this is it doesn't affect anybody's bank account. It doesn't affect any energy in a negative way. And I think it's something that everybody with a brain should be able to get behind if they actually look into this, because it's not all it's doing is pulling carbon out of the air and creating oxygen with a lot of other positive byproducts. And so I'm really excited for the interview, and I'm just really glad that you and your business partner, Bill, have been able to make it down to Nashville, Tennessee for this interview. But every interview, we start with a gift. Any guesses?
oh my goodness. My guess would be maybe it's something to eat.
You're real hot.
Oh my God. Look at this.
That's right. Those are Vigilance Elite Gummy Bears, 100% made in the USA. Little snack for you on the way back home.
Oh, thank you
You're welcome.
very much. These won't last long, I'll tell you that. My wife's addicted to gummy bears, I think.
Yeah, so am I. You
Thank
should
you.
be too. But so I like to start every episode off with a question from my Patreon account, which is a subscription account. They're our top supporters. That's why I'm sitting here. That's why you're sitting here. They are our top supporters and fund the entire operation here. So I give them a chance to ask a question. This question is from Adam Banks. And without getting too much into the science, because we're going to cover all that later on in the episode, have you published any peer-reviewed papers on this topic or product? Where can we find them? In what journal?
Most of the publishings that we've done are from universities. We can furnish the data from the University of British Columbia. Was probably our first formal study that we did at the Molecular Forestry Lab. And we are now completing the third year at Fresno State University Water Resource Center on how this product works and how it works with water use efficiency, not only carbon capture, because they go hand in hand. And so those that'll be published, I believe, in October, and it'll come out of the university, and we can furnish that information as well. So, but right now I could give him the publication from the University of British Columbia.
That would be great. I know I got a ton of interest from our subscribers on Patreon, and that was a popular question. The other very popular question, which I know we're going to cover later on, the most popular one from several different patrons was, does this product cause cancer, or is anything bad going to happen from this product?
I'm glad you asked that question. That was one of the first things that we worked on a number of years back. I happen to be in the pesticide business, not to digress a little bit, but there's an awful lot that goes into a pesticide being used today, because you have no choice when you eat food. And there's a tremendous amount of work in it. So we put the same amount of work into this. Now, this product is basically calcium carbonate that's ground in a very, very special way, and we can get into those details. But we've I've got studies on earthworms because of forestry. One of the things you'll worry about is earthworms and how that whole profile works. And we could not kill the earthworms. We couldn't kill their babies. We didn't disrupt their eggs. We did it on fish. And that's another type of study you have to do, is how you affect fish and the birthing of fish and the eggs and so on and so forth. And we've done it on mice, we've done it on rabbits, we've done it on rats, and we have the whole profile. Toxicology profile is what it's called, and it doesn't qualify for any toxicity. So
No negative anything.
no negative. And it's essentially what you have to have calcium, and that's what it is. I mean, we consume calcium through milk. Taking a Tums is calcium, and so it's good for us.
That's unbelievable that there are zero negative side effects from this. That's really excited. But so moving on, let's start to get into the science. Global warming, climate change. Like I had mentioned, it's a very divisive, politicized topic. So, as a scientist, without getting into any of the politics, can you give us a snapshot view of what global warming and/or climate change, whatever we're calling it these days, can you give us a snapshot of what that is?
I have a little video that I've given you that maybe you could play later on from NASA. But basically what happens, carbon dioxide is a good thing. But if we looked at the atmosphere real simply and said, okay, you have 21% oxygen, you have 78% nitrogen, we have 1% to deal with. Of that 1%, you have several gases that are in there. Carbon dioxide is the big player, a little carbon monoxide, a little methane, a little argon, a little hydrogen. The only thing that catches heat is anything with a carbon on it. And so carbon catches the sunlight. And so what we've done is, as we've used these fossil fuels, we've created this environment that's just above the area we live in the troposphere, of heating. And so that has a big play on climate change. Now, to the degree I'm not a climatologist, I'm an agriculturist. So, there's a difference there. I see it on the ground. I see a lot of things happening on the ground. I'm digressing a bit, but in California, it used to be foggy all the time between, let's say, Stockton and Bakersfield, and that would keep the heat out and the cool in. Now we have an extreme problem with dormancy, crops coming out of dormancy. And so we're using this product to help enhance dormancy. So it's a very important part of agriculture. And so the climate change, or what's occurring, is it's amazing to see it, and it's hard to keep track of it. I mean, last year we had freezing in Texas when they don't have freezing. Now, I drove through Texas last week, and there's hardly a cotton plant coming out of the ground on millions of acres because they're in a drought.
Yeah.
It's just one thing to another thing.
So when you say carbon catches sunlight, is that what you said?
Carbon in our atmosphere, as the light rays come from the sun, carbon is the only thing that holds heat. Hydrogen won't hold heat, nitrogen doesn't hold heat, oxygen won't heat. You have to have a carbon molecule to hold the heat. And hence, as we put in more and more carbon into the air from fossil fuel, we're able to capture more heat.
Okay.
It's just a ratio.
So when I listen to the news or anybody but a scientist talk about this, they're talking about rising temperatures. That's a big thing, right? It's getting hotter.
I also see places getting colder, but so are you saying when they take these temperatures, are what altitude are we talking here? Is there a constant, or it's 98 degrees in Bakersfield right now every day, or is it a certain altitude that they're checking?
NASA does, and I've looked at a lot of their reports. They'll do different layers of, at 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet. In agriculture, and for us people, we usually take it at ground zero, wherever that is. Most of the people live between sea level and 10,000 feet. In fact, the bulk of us live between sea level and 6,500 feet. So wherever your city's at or town's at, wherever the weather station's at, is usually right near the ground or about 10 feet up is where the temperature's taken.
Okay. So is this all, when we're talking about climate change, global warming, rise in temperatures, is it all from carbon? Or, because I heard you mention methane gas too, and I've seen that in other news sources saying that cattle feces is contributing, or is that?
I would blame it, or I would put the emphasis on carbon dioxide, CO2, over the methane. Methane has a short cycle compared to CO2. CO2 lasts hundreds of years in the environment, in the air, and it's a very stable gas. Methane can disintegrate or break apart between 3 and 7 years. And so it's kind of more of a short-term issue. It does catch heat, and people make a lot to do with it, but I'm more interested in CO2 because plants need it. Without CO2, we have no plants. In fact, half of the plant's weight is carbon, and it only comes from the air. So we need that CO2. It's pretty vital.
Okay.
And hence, that's what we get into what I do with the treatment on the plants.
Do you have any facts, any hard facts that show, any examples that show what's been happening over the past, let's say, 50 years?
Such as environmental facts?
Yeah. Rise in temperatures, maybe more hurricanes, colder temperatures like Texas, more extreme winters, more extreme summers.
Well, Texas is a
extreme
really
weather.
good example, again, as they had that tremendous freeze and all through the Midwest, but it really raised havoc in Texas because of the windmills, and they were dependent, and those things froze up. Now this year it's a drought. Mm-hmm. That's pretty extreme. And in Washington, which was just north of where I live in Oregon, we had an extremely hard late freeze, which is really unheard of, in the cherries. We lost probably half the production of cherries, a quarter production of the apples. And we've been growing apples and cherries there for 100 years. And so this is just this year. So we're seeing in agriculture around the world and in North America, things going to extremes.
Do you have some type of a scientific explanation on how the carbon is influencing all these extreme weather patterns?
Well, I do. I have funny little analogies, and hopefully people can appreciate that. But if, let's say that you want to go skiing, and you're going to go over the mountain pass to get up to the lodge, wherever you're at, our temperatures warmed up. They like to use, science likes to use Celsius. I'm fine with Fahrenheit, but we're over 3 degrees warmer. Well, the highway freezes at 32. And if you're 3 degrees warmer, then you're not going to have a frozen ice sheet to drive over to go skiing because it's warmer. And that was really apparent this year, especially in Oregon, that we had a lot of wet roads and they weren't covered in ice because it's a warmer climate. Now, climate does change. We can't deny that. It goes in cycles. Most weather patterns seem to go in about a 20-year cycle. A little bit warmer, a little bit wetter, then a little bit cooler, and back and forth, back and forth. And that's not holding true right now. It's 1 year, it's, through the roof, you might say. So
Yeah,
I hope that helps a little.
it helps.
I think the main thing, Shawn, is the temperature is rising. What if it goes to 5 degrees? What if it goes to 8 degrees? Then where are we at?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying because I think it's been a record-breaking summer all throughout North America and I believe in Europe. My question is, I understand carbon captures heat. My question is, how is it influencing these other extreme weather patterns like hurricanes? There seems to be more hurricanes happening. We've had more extreme winters here in Tennessee. They had a very extreme winter, I think, was it last year in Texas, as well as hotter summers. So that's kind of what I'm asking from a scientific standpoint. How is that influencing all these other weather patterns, not just a rise in temperature, but also decrease in certain months?
Well, apparently, as we learn more about everything in science, and you follow science, and it's always changing to some degree because we learn more and more, we have better tools to understand what's happening. There's a new phenomenon in the very higher upper atmosphere. And I was reading some articles about through NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Avionic Administration, that these really high altitude currents are affecting the lower currents. And normally there is about 9 different La Niñas that are studied of the ocean currents, and everything's been based off the ocean currents. But now there's some of this new technology about these high currents in the air that are influencing our ground weather, and just not the ocean currents, or they're influencing the ocean currents that's changing our weather. Again, that's a little out of my realm because it's a climatology issue more than it is an agricultural forestry issue. But,
Okay.
But we see it. We see it in up in the high elevations in forestry and where we have trees that don't get enough water. We have patterns now where certain species on south slopes with the lumber companies have gone into not being able to harvest that timber, and the timber's not growing because things are drying up and the climate is definitely changing. And some of these species have lived there for thousands of years, and they can't grow there now.
Well, let's move into the answer. Solbere. How did this whole venture start?
Well, we first started about 23 years ago, and one of the main in agricultural crops, and two of the biggest problems in agricultural crops is the sunburn, and not enough water, or how a plant works. And so there were a lot of things. You used to think, well, a white surface would reflect the light, so we wear, paint buildings white, or you have things to keep things cooler, and somewhat true, a reflection of light. But we started looking into it and looking at crop yield versus different types of treatment. And like I said earlier in the program, that we've changed varieties. People want all these nice varieties of apples. We used to just have basically a Red Delicious and a Gravenstein, and today we have Pink Ladies and Galas and all those different things. And the same is true with the almonds and almost all agricultural crops, all the new sweet corn varieties, but plants grow optimally at 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's their optimum production. That's where photosynthesis is at its optimum. It starts down about 45 and it shuts off just a little over 90, and it's kind of a bell curve. So we're optimum at 72. And if you keep the crop cooler and if you keep the crop working longer, which takes a lot more carbon to do that because plants are half carbon, that's where this technology came in. We started seeing different things over 20 years ago on these different treatments for sunburn. And you might say what we've developed is almost like the sunburn spray today. Instead of putting the old zinc oxide on, now we have these sprays that you can't see. And that's where technology has come that way. Well, it's come the same way in agriculture.
Okay.
So you don't have the white nose anymore, and our technology has changed quite a bit. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
It is. Keep going.
So as we developed that, we looked at light, and I got involved with Cliff Fairchild at Oregon State University. He's a laser expert. He determined the depletion of ozone for President Reagan in the late 70s. Taught school laser technology and physics at school for 40 years. Got involved with Cliff through his son. His son was my banker, actually, Cliff Jr. And he said, Dad needs something to do, and he's an expert at lasers, and it looks like this might work for us to determine how the plant sees light. And that's very true. And so I started working with Cliff about 13, 14 years ago on really defining this product and looking at how this product really works. And so we use lasers to determine how it works. And the laser technology on how it affects a plant on the interior, there's a lot of science guys. The most renowned person is Dr. Wada in Japan. We're the only people that I know of in the world that use coatings and laser technology to enhance photosynthesis that enhances carbon capture.
So, for us dummies in the audience, basically what this does, this solution or treatment that you've made, is you spray it on plants. It acts as some type of a sunscreen. It keeps the leaves at a certain temperature, under a certain temperature, which enables them to conduct photosynthesis for how much more time than normal?
Our studies at Fresno State are showing us about 45 minutes to an hour in the morning as the sun becomes what they call solar noon. And then as the sun moves away from the east side of the plant to the west side of the plant, then it starts up about 15 to 20 minutes sooner.
Okay.
So you get this extended period of photosynthesis, which takes more carbon. Plants only get the carbon from the air. So they bring CO2 in, and so for every pound of CO2 they bring in, they put out 4 pounds of clean oxygen. And that's a good thing. But to explain how that plant works, plants only use 1% of the sunlight, and they throw away 99%.
Okay.
So of that 1%, they still try to narrow that down inside the plant. The plant has a layer of cells, they call it palisade, that's up and down, and then the bottom part of your leaf has all these little spongy chlorophyll molecules running around. And what Solbere does, and these treatments do, is as the sunlight moves to the leaf surface and then goes into the interior of the plant, we reach way more parts of the plant. and we reach more of the chlorophyll.
Okay.
And then you need more carbon. And so you take more carbon out of the air, put more oxygen back out. That's the waste product. We take oxygen in and we put carbon dioxide out. Plants do that too. The other thing that this does is plants do that at night. It slows that process at night because plants are more efficient with it.
Okay. So, dumbing it down again for everybody, because a lot of people probably don't know what photosynthesis is. Photosynthesis is turning carbon into oxygen. So for 1 pound of carbon, a plant is turning 1 pound of carbon into 4 pounds of oxygen.
Well, the plant takes in the carbon.
Okay.
And moisture, water comes up from the roots, and the H2O is split because the plant wants the hydrogen, and it puts the oxygen into the air. Now, oxygen weighs 44, carbon weighs 12. So for every carbon that comes in, there's several oxygens that go out.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
And we all like clean air. So the nice thing about this product, if we can get everybody on board, agriculture's on board already, but that you're going to put tons and tons and tons and tons of clean oxygen back into the air and capture tons and tons of carbon. Just naturally. I mean, you don't have to do anything. You spray it and it's done.
That's what I love about this product. It's not cutting down on fuel. It's not making things more expensive. It's not changing what you drive. It's not doing any of that. It's just something that happens in the background that's positive for everybody on the planet, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, the technology to apply it's 50 years old or older. I mean, it's simple. It's the old KISS theory, you know. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, stupid. So you brought some of the solution with you.
Yes, I did.
Can we see how it works? You need a bottle of water?
I need a bottle of water. This is the new formula, and we're always working on formulas, just trying to make it disperse on the leaf better. We use things like lecithin that's in here. People eat lecithin all the time. It keeps the oil and the vinegar together in Italian dressing. We use a lot of glycerin that comes from plants, and it's used in cosmetics to keep moisture in your skin. So let's turn it around for the, it's double labeled. So this isn't but this is just about, it's not the appropriate amount. I'm just trying to guess. And you can see it disperses just like, I guess, cream into coffee, you know. Mix it a little bit, and there it is.
And that's it.
That's it, and you just spray it. You can use a spray bottle. You can use a helicopter on forestry. There's thousands of different spray rigs. The technology is extremely well known and established, but that's it.
So you take this solution, you spray it on a plant, and it does photosynthesis a couple more hours a day than it normally would.
If you want to take a shot of it, it tastes like milk and magnesia.
You first. Are you going to take a shot of that?
I don't know. I can take a little.
You want some ice?
Would be.
All right.
Oh. Yes, we, to keep it as a good preservative, you can smell it. That's another thing that's natural in there, clove oil.
Clove oil.
Clove oil. It's a natural preservative. And for all these people that like that kind of thing, we do put a little ethanol in there for a preservative with the clove oil. It disperses the clove oil.
All right.
Yeah.
So how would you get this out there?
I've tried over the years to get it out there. Our government owns 250 million acres, roughly, of forests. They're the largest landowners, our government. And there's a lot of things coming down the pike, so to speak, of carbon taxes and cap and trade. And all I'd like to do is, if anybody could help us, have the Department of Forestry certify it for carbon capture. Then there's all kinds of companies that's called cap and trade, people that are producing products that put CO2 in the air, would like to offset that. And you see that now on carbon footprint when you fly on a plane. You'll see like Delta says this or United says this. This would be an excellent way. All I have to do is certify it. We have all the data for it. Mainstream agriculture accepts it and uses it. If we could spray the forest, we could start turning this thing around right away, because you're going to have the trees in the forest photosynthesize more. And it's just not 1 year. When you spray a tree, you're going to get a number of years of benefit out of it. Because during that season, and even in a dormant season, when the leaves are gone, it still works. And we have all the data to prove that on almonds from California and other trees. You're going to keep capturing more carbon. If your tree 1 year is 10 feet tall and you apply this and it grows 20%, and the trees that you don't apply it to, of course, they grow 1 foot, they're 11 foot, we're 12 foot. Then you've accelerated carbon capture for a whole nother year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 down the pike, down the road.
Is this a one-time application?
You can do it a one-time application and get a huge benefit from it, or you can do it year after year.
So at a maximum, it would be once a year.
Well, I'd say at a minimum it would be once a year.
At a minimum.
For
it's spraying
certain
once a year.
crops,
Okay.
and at a maximum for others. That's correct.
Okay. How much, so the world is a big place, huge planet here. How much forest is going to need to be treated? How many plants would need to be treated before we actually see some kind of measurable decrease in carbon?
You know, that's a very good question, and I would like to answer that if we sprayed the national forest, the 250 million acres, it would be like putting 250 million Teslas on the road that summer.
Okay.
I mean, so it's fairly quick. The atmosphere is a tremendous place. I mean, a tremendous weight. It's in gigatons, and I don't want to get into that. It just blows my mind on how much that atmosphere weighs, because you don't feel it right here, right? But we're going to put a lot of clean oxygen back into the air, and that's going to have an influence. So at 0.4% of CO2 in the air now, as it's rising, is having the influence it's having now. Can you imagine just shrinking that a little bit and adding a lot more oxygen? You know, so the effect, I think we have a few years for the effect to really be solid and really take place, but we got to get started on it.
Okay. So did you say 250,000 acres of national forest? 250 million acres of national forest?
Right.
Is that U.S. forest?
It's U.S. forest owned by, I guess, us or Uncle Sam, one of the two.
Mm-hmm. So just the U.S., if just the U.S. did this, we would see a global impact within a couple of years.
Yes, because the U.S. amounts to whatever percent the U.S. is, and I've seen maps where China's so much of the carbon and warming because of China, and the U.S. is a much smaller fraction, but still a big fraction, and we could change that. And just use the trees. The trees, one of the Roosevelts, and I always get mixed up which one, said it was the lungs of the earth. And that's true. Plants are the lungs of the earth. They get 50% of their weight from the air. They need that carbon. So let's just help them take more carbon in. It's real simple. We don't have to use rocket science or anything like that, or try to have waste products. I mean, what are we going to do with all those batteries? So we put 250 million Teslas on the road. We're going to have 250 million batteries to deal with.
Yeah.
But not with trees, And water use efficiency, a lot of people don't know that term. It's huge in agriculture and forestry, water use efficiency, because when we run short of water, what are you going to do? We can put this product on a plant. I don't care if it's a tomato, a Douglas fir tree, a maple tree, and cut 20% of the water that plant gets in and affect the growth zero. The growth will be the same. In fact, usually, and all of our research shows it, when we drop the water by 20% in the irrigated trials at the Water Use Technology Lab at Fresno State, we still outgain the fully watered plants by 3 or 4%.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's huge. So, it's a good way to, if you don't capture more carbon because the forest is under stress in a particular region, at least you're going to save that tree's growth for that year so it can catch more carbon next year.
Well, this sounds like this could also be the answer for some other things, maybe like world hunger.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When we look at this whole phenomena, we measure the growth that you see. But it's like when you spray a tree, you have girth, so you have more wood. University of British Columbia shows that more wood, but 40% of the plant is underground. So we have more or larger root systems, which takes more carbon, which makes water use efficiency better because the plant has more to gather from. So it would be like increasing, world hunger is a real issue, and it's like increasing the ground we grow crops on by 20% at a minimum.
So this thing is like, you can correct me, I don't want to use any improper terminology, but so this is a sunscreen for plants, which helps them do photosynthesis more, which increases plant volume both above and below the ground. So the root systems are basically expanding. So it's not actually taking less water. It just has more land to draw, more area to draw water from.
Has more
Am I
area
correct?
to draw water from, and the plant will regulate itself. It also cools the plant. And when we do these scientific measurements, and we do a lot of them now, called albedo, and I won't get into that, but albedo basically is how that plant uses sunlight. And it uses a certain section. Light starts about 200 nanometers and goes way out to X-ray. But plants, and what we see for light, is a very small spectrum of that light. So it's known as nanometers, so 350 nanometers to about 850 nanometers are red, of rainbow. A rainbow is what the plants use, the light from a rainbow. That's what they use. And that light is really important on this water issue because that drives the plant for photosynthesis in that region. And that, when we make this material, I'm glad it's about empty. When we make this material, our focus is in that regional light, how we affect that regional light. We don't worry about X-ray and all that stuff, and we don't worry about the lower stuff. We worry about what the plant uses. So this is developed for a plant to utilize the sunlight, which utilizes water and nutrients much better. Did I explain that or get too far off?
No, it makes perfect sense. So I would think that
farming community would be all over this and everywhere in the world. Do they know about this yet?
Well, we're an Oregon company and based in Junction City, but we do sell around the world. And for an example, this year we've shipped a little over 750,000 gallons to the state of Washington for apples. I think it would be very hard for anybody to eat an apple from the West Coast, where most 90% of the eating apples come from, without eating this product.
Really?
It's so well accepted. I mean, it's extremely well accepted. If you have a pomegranate, we have it on pomegranates in California. It's on pistachios. It's on almonds. It's on carrots. We ship it to Israel. We ship it to Morocco. We ship it to Spain. We ship it to Italy, to Chile, to Brazil. So Canada.
So this is international.
Yeah, very much so. And we manufacture it around the clock. And we're expanding our manufacturing right now. And the Solbere part of it is I've gotten off, and Bill, my partner, and our team has gotten off into really working with forestry. Agriculture's totally accepted this. Forestry tends to be behind about 20 years in science.
Okay.
I mean, they have a lot of smart guys, don't get me wrong, but, a farmer has to get paid, and it's got to work. And he plants his crop day one, and 90 to 120 days later, he's harvesting, unless it's a permanent tree crop. If it's trees or wine grapes, he's got to wait 3 to 5 years. So he keeps having to invest every year, every year, every year. You can't invest in something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so...
How are the farmers applying this to their crops?
There's 2 or 3 ways. It's all sprayed, sometimes by air, like on tomatoes when they get near the rows are crossed over and you don't want to squish all the tomatoes with a spray rig. Typically, it's a farm tractor with a sprayer, and they call them air blast sprayers or tower sprayers. We have a new technology which uses electrostatic sprayer, which is really unique, and it'll coat all the way around a leaf or all the way around a fruit. It's pretty neat. So we're charging these particles, so the particles of water come out. You charge them with a negative ion, and it just captures the fruit like that. It's pretty unique.
So would the Forestry Department or the U.S. government or any government, if they wanted to, would they apply it the same way? Through air?
They've applied it through air. It's known technology for forestry. It's usually a helicopter.
Okay.
But you've got a wonderful set of planes with Air Force that we can put booms on those babies and fly them all over the place.
Yeah. What are some of your hang-ups then with the Forestry Department and with the U.S. government?
Everything with the U.S. government seems like it's specialists and hurry up and wait.
Mm-hmm.
I hope Bill's got some answers for you on that one.
I'll save that one for Bill,
Please do.
the business guy. But
I just get too frustrated with it.
getting back to the carbon footprint, do you guys have any competition out there? Say you're wanting the government to take this on as a way to reduce the carbon footprint. What other competition is out there that they might be interested in?
They'll probably look at the old technology. This problem in agriculture has been looked at for centuries. But those things don't work very well. They reflect light, and that's about all they do, but they also capture heat, which ruins the temperature curve for photosynthesis. So I don't know, Shawn, I really don't know if I said, okay, who's my competitor with the technology we have developed over I don't think we have one.
Well,
I mean, maybe.
last night we were talking about Bill Gates's.
Oh, good Lord. He wants to put this micronized calcium carbonate up into the air. I guess that's a competitor. And he has no idea what it's going to do. Now, calcium carbonate, I will tell you this, it transmits 95 to 97% of the light. And that's done what's called in an integrated sphere, and we've done all those studies, but that's what it does. And so you grind the calcium carbonate, and I would imagine he's not going to be putting boulders up there. He wants to put very finely ground calcium carbonate up there to diffract or do something with the light. Well, he's using the wrong compound, number one. I don't know what he's thinking. And he certainly doesn't understand plant science. Number two, you've got Bill Gates and other folks trying to take CO2 out of the air and put it in the ground. And after several thousand years, it makes calcium carbonate.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's a great idea, but what we do with our calcium carbonate, we take it out of the ground, we put it on plants, they lose their leaves, it falls to the ground, and it completes a cycle. You know, so we put it back into the ground. So competitively, I don't know, there's been people that have tried waxes, there's people that have tried shellacs and all kinds of things. And it's not accepted in agriculture, and so it's not going to be accepted in forestry. I'm sorry I didn't answer that very well for you.
No, it makes sense. It does make sense. What is this going to cost the government to do? If they were to implement this and they were to spray 250 million acres of forest, what is that going to cost the government?
In the beginning, because our facilities out in Oregon, which has a ton of federal ground, it would probably cost somewhere between $50 and $100 an acre. But as you produce this in quantity and in different locations, that could very well be a total cost of $50 an acre or less.
$50 an acre or less? And
Right.
nobody's
In the
nobody's
future.
looking at this from the government yet.
No. Now that the new plant that takes carbon out of the air, I guess there's one being built in Australia, there's one in Iceland that is now working, is $1,000 a ton to take the CO2 out of the air. But they don't put any oxygen back. You know, plants are really unique. They take the carbon out of the air. You can take a ton per acre out of the air, but you're going to put 4 times its weight of clean oxygen back in the air. And these guys with wanting to catch the CO2 and put it in the ground and form calcium carbonate in a million years, well, that's a great idea, but it's a tremendous cost.
Would Solbere be faster as well?
Overnight, the next day, you've helped the plant, and the plants, it takes a season for all that to grow, but that doesn't matter. It starts working the next day.
So your product is faster, it's safer, and it also has all these other extra benefits to it.
Right. Comes from the earth, and we put it back
And
on
it's
the
cheaper.
earth. Yeah.
And nobody's looking at it.
Yeah. Calcium carbonate, the biggest use for calcium carbonate today is cement. And we have lots of it around.
Yeah, we do.
And calcium is one of the most abundant minerals in the earth. There's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons.
Would putting carbon into the ground, the Bill Gates method, would that be harmful in any way?
I don't see it being harmful because carbon dioxide resides in the ground. And they do a lot of things in farming. To digress back on carbon capture, competitor, they're trying to do no-till farming all across the United States. The benefit of no-till farming is we don't erode our soils. But science is showing that it doesn't really capture a whole lot more carbon. So we don't really have a competitor.
Back to the cost. You said possibly $50 an acre. Do you have an overall expense of if the government was to do this, what the cost would be? We spoke about it last night.
Yeah, I think it would drive it. I think if we could get manufacturing equipment bigger and mine calcium, there's calcium all over the place, so we'll get closer to wherever we're going to be spraying it. Yeah, we could drive it way down. The most expensive part of our product right now, to be honest, is the freight. We grind this up in Canada. We use hydraulic or power generated from dams. And it's ground specially up there in Abbotsford, and then we truck it down to Junction City, Oregon, and manufacture it with water generated from the dams. And so the carbon footprint's really small. We want to kind of keep that up wherever we go.
I guess what I'm getting at is last night at dinner we were talking about what would the overall expense be, and it came up, I believe it was $1 billion to $1.5 billion to treat all forests in the U.S.
I'm terribly sorry. I missed the question. That's probably my age.
No.
I think we figured about 4.7 billion.
4.7 billion to treat the entire United States, all the forest.
The best part of the national forest. That's correct. Yeah, and states have a lot of ground. Some states have little. Some states have a lot ground. But there's the federal government owns 26% of Tennessee.
Okay.
And you have a lot of forests here that we could spray.
We do.
Yes, and especially around here. So, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of ground that can be sprayed. When we say the national forest, we're primarily looking at the 7 western states or 9 western states, but there's a lot of forests in New York and here and North Carolina, all through the Appalachians. You know, if counties and states and the federal government got on a spray program, we could turn this thing around fairly soon, or at least it's a good, environmental, safe way to start chipping away at it in a big way.
Yeah, I don't understand how they're not looking at it, considering we just spent $54 billion to Ukraine. We waste money on all kinds of things, and $4 billion to put a massive dent in the carbon footprint. I don't understand why nobody's paying attention.
Well, 3 years ago today, I was at the U.S. Forest Service in Washington, D.C. with Bill's brother, Bob. Bob had arranged a meeting for us with the top manager, I guess you'd say, of the U.S. Forest Service. And we offered to work with them. Could we do experiments with you? Could we spray part of the forest? You have NASA, that's part of the government, that maps photosynthesis around the United States and with infrared. Very, very simple technology. And never got a phone call back, never got a word. I've met with senators, I've met with congressmen.
Do you want to name any of them?
Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Oregon has one of the nicest groupings of national forests that we have, or acres. And we were pushed off onto an aide. And I don't think the aide knew too much about how plants grow or anything as far as that's concerned. There was a congressman in northern Florida, that was very impressive, that was very helpful, Gates.
Matt Gates.
Matt, and he made phone calls to the Department of Agriculture for us in Florida, which I work with, and work with infectious species in Florida for a different product, different ag product that we have, and which was very, very helpful. The only one, and we met with Senator Merkley. We were unable to meet with a couple of other people, but ran into a number of people at the Trump Towers and talked to a number of politicians at Trump Towers. And everybody says, oh, it's a good idea. And then it just fizzles.
Maybe they haven't found a way to make money off of it for themselves.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. Just going back real quick, back to some of the other byproducts that you've discovered through this is, last night we were talking about forest fires, which is obviously a big problem out west.
Forest fires, really get going because trees are dried out or trees don't have enough water. And one of the things that happens when you spray this product on trees is they become more water use efficient and more fire resistant. You become more fire resistant because obviously when things are growing and things are nice and green in the spring, we don't have forest fires. But when we're running short on water, it's the end of the season, it hasn't rained for 60 days, the fires get up and get going pretty good. And this product can really help forestry with forest fires because essentially if you're helping preserve the water that the tree has to use, and like I say, you have a 20% give or take in there. So if you're short on rainfall, let's say you're short a few inches on rainfall, but you spray this product on, then you're not going to be short on rainfall. And this is, to the extreme.
I mean, I would think California would be jumping all over this. I hear forest fires every year after year after year. I have friends who live out there. They're always evacuating out of California during forest fires. And have you guys reached out to
Well, that's part of the bill discussion.
State
Bill's
government?
reaching out to the U.S. Forest Service and trying to get trials going with the U.S. Forest Service. We've invited them to Fresno State University. Bill's wrote letters to Gavin Newsom and to people in his office. I can't tell you how many letters Bill has wrote to people in California and the government agencies, and it always falls on deaf ears. I don't believe we've got one answer back. I got a hold of a month ago the California Air Authority. I've had the receptionist gentleman call me back and try to route my call to another person. That person did call me back and was going to route me to somebody that was familiar with forestry and agriculture, and it fell on deaf ears. Nobody's called.
Damn.
And in the new climate bill, there's $4 billion for water use efficiency and to try to, how are we going to, if you spray this on every acre of ag ground, you'd save, it saves, let's put it in simple terms. And let's just talk about an ag crop, say tomatoes. We save 20% of the water a tomato uses, and you get the same yield. So the farmer's not hurt, it works for the farmer. It would save per acre 120,000 gallons of water per acre.
Wow.
There's 6 million acres of farm ground in California and 12.5 million acres of forestry. You're talking about saving jillions of gallons of water. But I don't understand the government agencies.
So this could solve a water issue as well.
Huge water.
So we got reduced carbon footprint. We have faster plant growth. We have
More food.
We have less forest fires.
And
what else we got?
Well, you're going to reflect 5% of the sunlight back up in there, so you have cooler temperatures, because part of the sunlight, the part that heats, is the part I was explaining earlier. It's not this out here, it's from 850 to 200. Well, you're going to reflect 5% of that back up there. That's what calcium carbonate does. It's natural, it just has to do that. And that helps a little bit with the temperature gauge.
Very interesting.
Yeah, about 5, and all the oxygen you're going to put back in the air. Everybody likes clean air. I don't think anybody can dispute that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Are there any other byproducts, any positives coming out of this that we haven't mentioned yet?
No, I think those 5 are the ones that we focus on and look at and form all of our questions and answers around, are those 5 things, depending on what part of the industry you're in.
Well, I think we should take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk to Bill, the business guy.
Thank you so much
Is
for
there
letting me tell
anything-
my story.
It's my pleasure. Is there anything else that we're missing before we take this break?
No, maybe you'd like to take a hit off that like I did.
All right. I'll do that on the break.
Thank you.
But my pleasure. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you for your time.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
This was totally different. This was like I was dying, but I didn't care about anything. Nothing. I saw my head split into 2 from the top down. I saw our waterfall several times. And I said, okay, I'm ready to do it again.
Were you nervous again?
I was nervous again, but I knew there was more. And it's not, you don't know what else there is, but you know that there's more. Essentially, what's happening is you're entering this higher level of consciousness that you've not experienced before, and you don't want to come back. And I just started yelling at the top of my lungs. I was like, go in there! Go in there! Get in! And I knew what it was like to die.
To solemnly swear that the testimony...
Amid fresh reports of reckless behavior by Blackwater in Iraq, Blackwater's CEO, Eric Prince, made no apologies to a congressional investigating committee.
I disagree with the assertion that they acted like cowboys.
And it says 3 senators, Joe Biden, Chuck Hagel, and John Kerry, the future Vice President, Secretary of Defense, and Secretary of State, respectively, posed while waiting for Blackwater rescue.
Their U.S. Army helicopter got lost in a blinding snowstorm and set down in Taliban territory on the side of a mountain.
Do not ever discount the Iranian influence on the Biden-Obama administration then, as there is now. He said, Mr. President, give us the authorities and $1 billion, and in 3 weeks the flies will be walking in the eyeballs of our enemies.
Prince said his employees act with restraint and professionalism. He boasted that none of the U.S. diplomats he is paid to protect have been killed or wounded.
It was a great honor that they turned to us, because it was a very important mission, right? Because the CIA is the ones who made that victory possible for the United States.
We've had a better response from Blackwater than we have from the State Department.
We fought back on all fronts. The one place that they had us over a barrel was with the State Department.
Witnesses say the two SUVs were ambushed as they drove through town.
Another convoy of guys that got ambushed and shot up on the Baghdad highway.
The contractors worked for Blackwater Security, a company that protects coalition personnel.
Knowing that the clowns at the State Department and the Obama administration did everything they could to block a program like that, because it's not something they directly controlled, it is such a mess. It is such a fetid swamp. Trump was right to call it a swamp. It is.
Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Shawn.
You're welcome. So, you're the business brains behind the whole project, correct?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I'm one of them.
All right.
Just
Well,
more my capacity.
unlikely conversation. I found you guys or discovered you guys through Rob O'Neill. We had a very unlikely, uncommon conversation for us after his interview, and he had mentioned that he was involved with you guys, and it just sparked my interest. One, I was really curious what the hell Rob O'Neill has to do with this whole thing, not being in that realm at all, and then two, obviously what it's actually doing, really caught my interest. So I just want to thank you again for coming out to tell us about it. But as far as the global warming, climate change debate, where do you kind of stand on that?
Well, Shawn, that's a good question, and George discussed some of this, but the fact of the matter is the planet is getting warmer. And we know that because we have the government and other entities have recorded the global temperatures dating back some 150 years. And for example, we could find out what was the temperature in Nashville on September 12th, 1899. They have that figure. And so the numbers don't lie. It's going up, global temperatures. Now you talk about, why is that? What's the cause? And the scientific explanation, and I really haven't heard any explanation to the contrary, is that the reason why we have increased global temperatures is because of the greenhouse gas effect. Greenhouse gas emissions, primarily carbon, are getting trapped in the atmosphere. I read an article where a scientist kind of explained it as it's like having a blanket over the atmosphere and the heat is trapped inside. So that appears to be the explanation as to why there are increased temperatures. Now, what is the effect? You're probably getting a lot of debate on that, but we do know this, that 2016 and 2020, those years are the warmest years on record ever. You had in London, just this past June or July, it hit 104 degrees. Yeah. It had never been 104 degrees. You have, even in Oregon, where George is from, last June, they had record temperatures in Eugene and Portland, 115, 120 degrees.
Yeah.
The last 7 Julys are the hottest on record. So you can argue about, why is that the case? What was the cause? But those are some pretty scary facts and figures that we have to deal with as a society.
I'm with you. The argument, unfortunately, the argument is, well, what about the record cold winters, and what about all these other changes that are happening, and it just gets tricky for somebody that's not a scientist or not involved with somebody like George who knows what the hell they're talking about. It seems like nowadays you can pull facts any way you want the narrative to go. And so I wish somebody could explain more on, I do agree with you. We are getting I don't even have to agree with you. The science is there. You know, the summers are becoming hotter. I think you said, you mentioned that 2016 and 2022.
And 2020 are the warmest years on record. And
Yeah.
that's not an opinion.
You can't.
That's a fact.
You can't argue that. I think the argument is, well, climate's been changing for millions of years, so. But with that being said, the way I like to think about it is probably way out there. But you know, if you run your car in your garage with the door closed, then you're going to die, and so. Because that doesn't have anywhere those emissions have nowhere to escape to. Well, the world, you know, is a big garage. We're all driving around in it, and this carbon isn't going anywhere. It's not just floating off into space and leaving. It's hanging out, and there's more and more and more being produced, and we're not taking care of the situation. And you know, whether that's leading to climate change, whatever it is leading to, it's not fucking good for us. And so. That's what I really like about your product is it's just cleaning the atmosphere.
Yeah, we got to, as a country, get on the same page here. Whether you are in favor of green technology or whether you believe fossil fuels are getting a bad rap, there's a common ground there.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people are not ready to say, well, let's just, you know, shut down energy right now and replace it with renewable energy. They're not ready for that. But capturing carbon, trying to get a little better balance with nature, who's not for that?
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't think anybody would not be in that.
It's a bipartisan approach, I believe.
Yeah.
As you've said.
What have you heard about this rock that they just found in the river in Germany?
I did hear about that. I'm probably not telling the story right, but yes, it was literally just a few days ago, I think, or a week ago. There is a huge boulder in a river in Germany, and apparently they were noting that in 2018, the level of the water in that river had got to a point where
1616.
Yeah.
Wasn't the year 1616?
There was etched on the stone or the boulder.
In 1616.
Yeah, that said something along the lines of, if you see me, weep for me. And so, you know, Lake Mead's the largest reservoir in this country. And it is currently at 27% capacity. You know, it's the lowest level since it was constructed as part of the Hoover Dam back in the 30s.
Wow.
So there's a lot of evidence out there.
Well, what's great about this product is it literally does not affect anybody's life in a negative way. It doesn't. You're not going to be charged more for fuel prices. You're not going to be forced to buy an electric vehicle. You're not going to any of that. It's just cleaning the air. And so I think that's something that everybody can get behind. But as the business guy, maybe you're a little more familiar with some of the numbers, but what's the least amount of land mass that would need to be treated in order to make a pretty substantial impact, a measurable impact of decreasing the carbon footprint? What would that look like?
Well, I look at it as, all right, we have the assets available to us. We have the infrastructure, trees. That's the carbon technology that is not being used. And there's a lot of trees out there, Shawn. You've got 750 million acres in this country. And of that, about 56 to 58% is privately owned. But the rest is owned by the public, local, state, federal government. I think George mentioned that the federal government owns about 250 million acres. And if it were to cost, as George mentioned, in the neighborhood of $50 per acre, I'm just doing the math now, I think that would be 50 times 250 would be 1.25 billion. Okay? That seems like kind of a pittance.
Yeah.
When you consider that the budget for the Department of Forestry alone for 2022 is 8.5 billion. And you have another 131 billion, I believe, in discretionary funding. So that doesn't totally answer your question. But if we were to spray, we should spray all 250 million acres. But if we sprayed even 10% of the federal lands, which would be 25 million acres, you would put a good dent in the emissions that are generated by people in the United States.
Yeah. That's the other thing that really fascinates me is because, I don't read much on global warming and or climate change or anything. I'm aware of the carbon footprint, but for me personally, I think a lot of people feel like this. It's almost, I did not ever think that just one country could make that much of an impact, so for people like me, we can't even get our country on the same page, let alone the globe. And if we can't get the globe on the same page, then how the hell is any of this going to work? But if you're telling me that the United States alone could put a major dent in the carbon footprint, and then maybe we got Canada involved, and who knows, we get the rainforests in Brazil, involved, and man, but just one country, our country, that gives me a little bit of hope.
Shawn, it would snowball. Once you've done, say, this kind of project, you would see the results. And, I liken this to the vaccine for COVID. When we developed that here, we didn't just hoard it. We shared that with the world.
Yeah.
And, if the rest of the world saw what we are doing in this country, and as you say, who can really object to cleaning up the air? I think that it would catch on in Canada and elsewhere.
Yeah, in the cost, it's practical. All things considering that we spend money on is practically nothing. We spent $54 billion to Ukraine. That's not even our country. I can't remember how much the inflation's reduction package was. Was it? Do you remember how much that was?
It's a lot, and I don't know how many billions.
Yeah, I think it was 400 or 500 billion.
Yeah, but they
nothing.
have
1.5 billion to reduce the carbon footprint.
Well, Shawn, are you any worse for the wear? Let's say we sprayed 250 million acres.
Yeah.
Okay, and it costs $1.5 billion. Okay, and it's going to work. We know it's going to work because we have all the science and all the university studies that show it will work.
Yeah.
But are you going to be any worse for the wear? Think of all the money we spend on ventures, on technology, on trying new innovations that strike out.
Yeah.
I think Bill Gates said, and he should be investing in our company, that he will look at these companies and invest in them knowing that 90% are going to fail. And so there is a lot of reason for the government to try it on a large scale.
Yeah.
They have the budget.
Yeah. Well,
they have the assets.
It's a real solution to an ongoing debate that never seems to end. And I hope they do, but so moving on, how long, say we did treat all 250 million acres of national forest here in the U.S., how long would it take before we start seeing a measurable difference in the carbon footprint?
Well, you're not going to see it tomorrow. The beautiful thing is, the Department of Forestry, they work with NASA. And so if you sprayed, a certain number of acres, they've got these infrareds and the satellite and everything else. And it can tell you, oh, this is extended photosynthesis, this much longer. They have that data available. And within a few months, you can now measure how much more water retention have we seen in trees, how much additional carbon has been sequestered. And so, to answer your question, it's not going to happen overnight. You will see that it's working overnight. But, in a year, I mean, if it, like it's worked in agriculture, you're seeing 15, 20% growth rate. And so a year after it's sprayed, you will see an appreciable difference. And now you move into year 2 and year 3, so remove a lot of carbon.
So plants that are being treated are growing 15 to 20% larger.
Yeah, we would expect, I mean, it's going to vary depending on the species, depending on the location, but overall, you're going to see that kind of a growth rate. And bigger trees equal more carbon sequestration.
You guys had a video of a Christmas tree farm, I believe. I want to throw that up. Do you want to talk about it first?
Yeah. Let me set that up a little bit, because you had asked George about what are the other benefits of Solbere, and he talked about, the water use efficiency component. That alone, people should be jumping all over.
Yeah.
Private and public sector. And the wildfire mitigation component. I mean, this has been an evolving time for us in the company. And so moving into forestry now as an answer to really helping mankind with the problems we face going forward with global warming. So we do these various tests and university studies. And so George's brother was working with some of these Christmas tree vendors, and, they want to have a bigger Christmas tree, spray it, and, cut it down 2 years later, and it's bigger than the untreated. Anyway, George's brother had this Christmas tree, and it was in his house, and after Christmas, he set it aside, and he kept it outside. And we know when that Christmas tree had been cut, as it shows in the video, it had been cut 77 days earlier when we filmed this video. And
77 days?
Yeah. So here's, you can imagine, I know when I put my Christmas tree out on January 1, and a few days later, it's not looking so good.
Yeah.
So here's George holding this Christmas tree, and I think it was a 6-foot noble. But anyway, it looked like it had just been cut the day before. And he's out there with this Christmas tree farmer, and he's holding it next to, trees in the ground, Christmas trees. And you really couldn't tell much, if any, difference between, the living tree in the ground versus the one that had been cut 77 days earlier. So, that was further validation that, wow, the water retention that trees have as a result of this product is huge from a wildfire mitigation standpoint.
Yeah. I want to play that video real quick.
In 2020, the west coast of the United States was on fire. Oregon wildfires burned over 1.1 million acres and destroyed 4,000 homes. California was hit even harder, with over 4 million acres burned and over 30 lives lost. The unprecedented 2020 wildfires were fueled by climate change, and with steadily rising global temperatures, future wildfires are predicted to increase in magnitude each year. This has driven horticultural scientist George Baker to work tirelessly, creating a solution that will help save us from the devastation we saw in 2020. George has spent years researching and perfecting his product, Solbere. This nature-based solution makes trees healthier by significantly increasing water retention. Healthier trees are a weapon against the raging forest fires that continue to grow.
It's designed to diffract the light and to split the light into 2 rays, so it softens the light that touches the tree. I think that's a big key.
Kirk Stroda, a Christmas tree grower, applied Solbere to his trees in May and August of 2020. On February 5th, he compared a noble fir that was cut 77 days earlier on November 18th with trees that remain uncut on his lot. The results are astounding.
So you got 2 trees. You got one that's growing out of the ground, and you can see that it almost looks the same.
I don't think there's any difference between the tree that's still alive and the tree that's been cut for 2 months.
Several aspects are very important about that. Water retention, so they're more sunburn resistant, they're more fire resistant if it was in the forest.
The trees just seemed to look healthier. We had a hot, dry summer, and with the smoke and everything, we didn't see the stress going into fall like we normally do on trees.
This scientific phenomenon maximizes plant protection through increased water retention. By treating our forests with Solbere, wildfires will be less intense and more controllable in the near future. Please visit our website at solbere.com for more information regarding this revolutionary product.
So moving into who you guys have reached out to, I know you've reached out to the federal government. I know you've reached out to the state government of California. Any other government entities?
Well, that about covers it. I mean, it's been a frustrating process. You know, as George mentioned, going back, he and another owner had visited with, some Trump administration officials, and that didn't get the traction we had hoped. And it may have been because of COVID and the pandemic and the other concerns that the administration was dealing with. But, a lot of letters to state and federal government congressmen, senators, and emails, and just trying to get people to, take a look at this.
Both sides of the aisle?
Oh, yeah. Because this is a both sides of the aisle deal.
Yeah.
And anyway, so this Christmas tree video, I thought, wow, this thing's amazing. And I live in California, and so I'm like, I've got to send this to people in Washington, Oregon, California. So all of the various, fire-related entities. And, well, lo and behold, I did get a response back from the U.S. Department of Forestry, and specifically someone in California that works on the wildfire mitigation side and the innovative technology side of it. And so we are currently in talks with the Department of Forestry about doing a project, not because they have the vision we have in terms of let's see if we can, do something about global warming, but rather, hey, there have been in the last since 2018, the 8 largest fires on record in California. We've had the 8 largest fires on record since 2018 in California. And so
since when?
If you take a look at
2018, did you say?
If you look up on the USDA website, the 20 largest fires in the history of California, you will see that the top 8 have occurred since 2018. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody didn't forget to put out his campfire, but it's because vegetation is dry.
But it wouldn't have spread that far.
Right.
Yeah, I could see somebody making that argument, well, a lot of these are started by man. Yeah, but they can't be contained.
Right.
The containment issue would be a lot easier to control if they were using your product.
Yeah. So this person from the USDA, finally somebody looked at like this Christmas tree video, and it's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And so we're in talks, and I'm optimistic that we will get a project done. And he wants to use it for purposes of trying to mitigate or prevent, fire spread in the future. Makes perfect sense. And it's a no-brainer in California. You get a 2-for-1. You're going to get bigger trees, and they're going to be more resistant to fire. So I think we'll get a project done. And when we get a project done, whether it be on a small scale or something larger, there's going to be a lot of data that the federal government will have available to them. And that really could, the company could really take off then.
What about the private sector? I have zero confidence in the federal government. None at all. I think they're completely incompetent. What about the private sector? Say 75% of the farming community were to use this. Would that reduce the carbon footprint, or private forests?
Well, here's the problem with that. And, I'm more locked into kind of the forestry, and I understand that it has been a transition from agriculture to forestry and science. And, you can test on tomatoes and get a result in 6 months, less than that, because it turns over. So now you have the private sector, which is 58% of this 750 million trees, 750 million acres of trees. And so, they are not growing those trees just to look at them. They want to cut them down and harvest them. And there's different harvest cycles, be it 20, 30, 40 years. And so there has been interest in terms of, hey, it takes me, I'd like to get a 30 or 40 year cycle knocked down 5 years.
I don't
make a lot of money.
I don't understand how you guys didn't fly here on a private jet. There's just so many benefits to this thing, I didn't even think about the lumber.
Yeah, but hold on. Here's the story. So they're looking at it, which, is not how the company is looking at it. We would prefer the trees to stay there. But what incentive does the private forest owner have? Well, they have one incentive that if I cut a tree down every 40 years and I could reduce that to 35 years, we'll say, but have the same yield, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, what we've got to do, I think the federal government, who you don't have a lot of confidence in, and
do you?
Well,
more than
I'm
me.
hopeful.
All right.
It moves too slow. Yes, don't get us going down politics. So, but what we have to do, and this is what drives me crazy, they have legislation. It's called Q45, and you got to have tax incentives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they have, and this is for the energy sector, is there is legislation, it's called Q45, that if you sequester carbon, and it's verified, then we will give you a tax credit, Exxon, whomever. Okay, but the way it has to be, it's got to go in the ground. You got to dig a hole, and it's got to be put in the ground. That's what the legislation calls for. Now, Canada, interestingly enough, they have the same legislation, but it includes above ground air capture, carbon sequestration. And so we took the Q45 bill. This is no joke. We took the Q45 bill and redlined it and basically took what Canada has, which said, hey, if you can store it above ground carbon, it's got to be verified, you can get a tax credit. And so sent it to a congressman that was kind of touting that type of stuff, or it seemed like he was more into it. And we did get a response, but no action. It's like, why isn't that just introduced? Okay, we have current legislation that's all about underground. Why not do what Canada did? And we'll see if anyone is able to pull this off. But that would then, going back to private industry, you would say, look, if you can verify additional carbon sequestration, you will get a tax credit. So it would give them incentive to do it. And that should be done.
Yeah. How long has it been since you started that conversation?
That was probably a year ago, year and a half ago. And, everybody wants to blame COVID. And so I don't know, maybe that is the reason why, but hopefully we are kind of over the hump on the COVID thing. And now there seems to be a shift again to, okay, what are the problems facing the country? And I don't need to list those, but, climate's pretty high on the list. And so we need to revisit all of that.
Yeah. Have you guys reached out to any foreign governments?
No, we have our hands full right here, Shawn.
Yeah.
But
why not? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, you can only do so much, working with the universities, although that is in Canada. And we have focused on the U.S. market right now. I mean, we need to get a little more traction here.
Mm-hmm.
But if that falls
if Canada,
by the wayside.
If Canada has that legislation where they're going to get a tax credit for using
Yep.
They would get a tax credit for using your product, correct?
Yes.
Is that starting to happen?
Well, we do have somebody that's up in Canada, actually, who deals with the process of taking the calcium carbonate that George showed, and it has to be ground into this, it's smaller than a grain of salt. And he has some interest in getting involved and trying to promote and approach the government in Canada and sell it. But so we're hopeful that will happen. But right now, that's not on our radar.
Okay.
We need you need more funding. You need more help. You need more awareness.
I'm just asking because if you're running into brick walls with state and federal government here in the country, I mean, it seems like just if the United States can make that big of an impact, there are a lot of countries in the world that have a lot of land mass, and I would think South America would be a great one.
It would be. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but who else can purchase this? I mean, there's so many benefits. The farming, the carbon footprint, the water issue, lumber. I mean, there's so many benefits. Can anybody purchase this, or does it need to be sold on a mass scale, or how does that work? Could I go to you and buy this?
Yes, and 20% off for you if you do this next week. Shawn Ryan. But no, it's available. You go to the website and, you contact us, whether you need it for a gallon or two or have a small project, it's available. And we would love to get it out there and get it used.
Are you getting private people?
There have been private people, on a small scale. I mean, nothing, huge at this point, but more and more people are finding out about it and showing interest.
Last night at dinner, you had mentioned something with Cory Booker.
Right. Cory Booker, and this was a few years ago. And I was just thinking about that as we drove up there to dinner the other day. And he had proposed, we should plant 500 billion trees. That would be the answer. Okay. And so, I was thinking about that, and I'm all for planting more trees. That sounds great to me. Now, we have in this country about 300 billion trees. So I am assuming he's talking about around the world. I don't know where he's going to put all these, okay? That is great. Problem is you put a 1-year-old seedling in the ground, and now, we need to wait 20 years to really have it work. But it could be a good insurance policy, if you will, in the event that green technology, doesn't pan out like we all hope it does. I mean, if we're not carbon neutral in 2035 or 2050. But I'll tell you, now that I think about it, we should work with Booker and, plant trees. But what they should do is you got to dip them in Solbere. Cost about 0.5 cent to do that. And we know, because we have done studies through the University of British Columbia, one of the problems with seedlings is you're going to have a mortality rate. You stick them in the ground, and for whatever reason, too hot, too cold, you're going to have, 30%. You get differing numbers, but they don't all make it.
Yeah.
So the ones treated with Solbere, though, we'll cut that mortality rate right in half. Okay, so that's big on an economic scale. And in the university studies, we did this one study, it showed that the circumference was increased as much as 46% on these seedlings. I mean, that's huge. So now you're taking a seedling and you've got the one that's untreated, and it's not quite as big as the seedling that you put a spray bottle and sprayed it in the nursery. You put that in the ground, okay? You know, when it's 10 years old, it's going to be bigger than the untreated one. So I like Booker's idea. We could do that. The other thing, though, if you spray the current forestry you have, spray it this year, you spray it next year, you spray it the year after, in terms of the overall growth rate and the carbon that you would capture, you could, you know, take care of a couple 100 billion of Cory Booker's trees right there.
Yeah.
So
how often do you have to spray this? How often would you have to use the solution to treat the plants or the trees?
Well, George would be the best to answer that, but you know, you want to, I think, do it at least annually.
Annually?
Yeah. I mean, you can do it once, and you're going to have, you know, I can't speak to agriculture, but to forestry, you're going to see an impact with even one spray, because it will have grown, be it 10 or 15 or 20% more than it otherwise would have. And so you have that going forward.
Would there be
now,
benefit?
Do you spray it again?
Would there be benefit in doing it every quarter, every 6 months, more than once a year?
Well, let's put it this way: there wouldn't be any harm in doing that, and that's part of, on a larger scale, you know, doing tests on mature forestry and perfecting the science and what you get. There's so many factors. It's like, you know, is it on the west side or the east side, and you know how it's going to impact specific species. But it's better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost much, Shawn.
Yeah. What are some of your, what would you say your major hang-ups are?
Personally or the company?
The company. If you want to get into personal stuff, levity. That's
yeah. You know, I think it is, you know, getting government to want to get behind this, to look into it. I mean, everybody, you know, touts their horn, you know, we need climate change and let's have legislation. Well, okay, let's see some action, okay?
Yeah.
What is out there? And it's like dealing with the person from the forestry department that is in the wildfire mitigation department. He is interested because he's into innovation. And we've got to find other methods if you believe, or if you would like to see the global warming level off and perhaps go down and return carbon levels to the 1960s level. We got to try something different. And we have the best technology out there to make that happen. And so the frustration is getting government to try it and to move it forward.
Yeah. What a pain in the ass, the government. What
can be?
What can everyday people do? What do you guys need to make this thing succeed? Maybe even without government assistance.
Well,
is that even possible?
Sure it is. That's a very good question. I mean, first of all, what we need is, you know, this is one big army, you know, you and me and everyone else. We need, you know, more people like you having us on their show. We've got to create a greater awareness about Solbere. And so we are very thankful that you had us on your show here. And, you know, hopefully your viewers will have found it to be an interesting conversation. And some may want to, you know, follow us on social media, post it themselves, repost. Go to the website, solbere.com, and learn a little bit more about it. You know,
So
write your
awareness.
local congressman, senator, and say, hey, try this.
Yeah.
So
more awareness.
Yeah, need more awareness. I mean, Shawn, nature, Mother Nature, this Earth's been around, this planet's been around for a long, long time. And it's fought the battle pretty well. And right now, this is a challenging time for Mother Nature, perhaps more so than ever in the history of the planet. And, we created the problem, mankind, if you believe that, the impact of fossil fuels have caused global warming. Got a lot of benefit out of doing that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, where would we be without it? But now we have to find a way to return it to the 1960s level. And, this is, as I say, there's the fight over green versus fossil fuels, and that's what this is not about. This is a lifeline for the fossil fuel industry, and it's an insurance policy for the green movement.
Have you guys? I feel you mentioned that earlier, that this is a great insurance policy.
Yeah.
For fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil, BP, whoever. I feel like that might be your biggest ally in this whole in the game here, because it is a perfect insurance policy for them. Have you guys reached out to them and tried to partner with any gas companies?
I actually have written to Exxon.
Really?
Yeah. And, never heard anything. But, we need somebody that has some juice with Exxon.
Yeah.
Get your foot in the door. But the thing about it is, Shawn, I mean, it's ready today. Okay. You can see that it works tomorrow, and it's economical, and it's the boost that Mother Nature needs to get over the hump.
Well, I wish you guys the best of luck. I really appreciate you coming up here. I'm excited about what you got going on. I hope this show reaches some people that can maybe pull some strings for you and make some things happen. But I just want to thank you and George for coming up here, or down here, I guess, over here to Tennessee, and sharing some of the stuff you guys have learned, your hang-ups and where you plan on going, along with all the facts. And I just really appreciate it.
That's right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you having us on, and let's see where this goes in the next year or two.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Shawn.
Cheers.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes, so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.